All right. Good afternoon. My name is Brett Kisker, and I am the Executive Director of Northland CAPS. I'm also a member of the Northland Education and Business Alliance, or NEBA. NEBA is a network of education and business organizations in Clay and Platte Counties. Our vision is to promote and provide business-driven educational opportunities for you, our next generation of business leaders. So I'm going to be your host during this session, but we actually have two other NEBA members that are here working in the background. The first person that you can see on camera right now is Amy Washam. Amy, if you'd wave for us. Amy is the director of the Kansas City campus of Northwest Missouri State University, and she's actually the educational chair of NEBA this year. We also have Christy Collins from the North Kansas City School District. She is, I'm gonna mess this up, the director of college and career readiness. Is that close? I'm really close, I hope, with that title, Christy. She's a big deal in North Kansas City School District. How about we put it that way? And her interest is connecting kids in the North Kansas City School District to business opportunities that are here in the Northland and around Kansas City. So just a few quick notes before we get to introduce our guest speakers for this session. The session is going to run for about 40 minutes. We do have a hard stop at 1:40. Our industry experts here today, Martha and Lily, are going to begin by just sharing their professional history and insight. But we want this to feel like a conversation. So if you're one of the attendees in the crowd, we encourage you to use the Q&A bottom. It's at the bottom of your screen right now, and you can start asking questions as soon as you want to. We want this to be conversational so that we're talking about the things you're interested in. We may not be able to get to them all, but we're going to do our best. So when the session ends, we will ask you to take a really quick survey, and we're asking to just give us honest feedback on this event so we can get better at hosting things like this in the future. And then last but not least, before we begin, we are recording this session. We are going to post it on the NEBA YouTube channel. So as NEBA, you can find on the YouTube channel in the near future. Okay, so with all of that in mind, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and ask Martha to unmute herself. Martha, would you like to tell us a little bit about your professional background, please?
Sure. Thanks, Brett. So I had the opportunity to grow up around the world, around the country. My dad was in the Navy, and as a result, I used sports as a way to stay engaged and move into a new community and find fast friends. And so because of that, I was really interested in athletics and the human body and performance. And my parents were Jayhawks, went to the University of Kansas. I finished high school out in Washington, D.C. And, once you're raised a Jayhawk, you got to come and be a Jayhawk. So I packed up my suitcases and came across halfway across the country to Lawrence, Kansas, and thought I was going to be a PE teacher because that's what my mom was. But as I arrived there, I learned about a new undergraduate degree called exercise science, which gave me the opportunity. I loved math and science in high school, didn't love calculus so much, couldn't understand infinity and the concept of infinity. But I loved math and science, and I loved, as I mentioned, how the body works. And so what exercise science provided for me was all of those opportunities, a little bit of physiology, kinesiology, sports psychology, and sports sociology. So had a great undergraduate experience, decided to stay on for my graduate degree in exercise physiology. And at that point, what I really was interested in was health and wellness, and accepted a position as a clinical exercise physiologist at one of our urban hospitals here in Kansas City. And so spent a number of years working with patients, helping them to, if they had an identified disease process, how to mitigate that disease process, but also how to improve people's quality of lives. And that opportunity and that privilege to sit with patients was really important to me. And I continued to do that work for a long time, and then had the opportunity to kind of shift my role and become more involved in public health, and understanding that if we're going to have a robust healthcare environment, we have to make sure that there's a good healthcare team in place, and that students understand the opportunities available within the healthcare team. So I moved into nonprofit leadership at that point, and ran a rural healthcare initiative up in Wisconsin. And then finally made this circle back to Kansas City, where I now run the Kansas City STEM Alliance. And so while we are still trying to build a diverse workforce in healthcare, I also had to quickly get up to speed on the importance of developing engineering and computer science, and how when you develop those skills, you are learning how to use those skills to solve problems, whether those are problems in your own community or problems in the world. And so I now have the opportunity to lead the Kansas City STEM Alliance and work with lots of school districts, lots of teacher leaders, and most importantly, I love engaging with the students. So that's what I do now.
That's a fantastic introduction. Thank you, Martha. So Lily, you want to tell us a little bit about your background as well? And then as soon as Lily gets done, again, at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says Q&A. And what we're hoping is that you'll type some questions in there because we want to answer the questions that are on your mind.
Hello. I kind of wish I had gone first because that was a fantastic introduction and mine is going to be much more brief. But my name is Lily. Hello, everyone. I graduated from Liberty High School in 2011, go Blue Jays. And after that point, I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia and got my Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering, which was not what I intended to do. I went there to study German and Spanish because I love foreign languages. And I went into work as a translator, and then I quickly realized that nobody would pay you to do that. So instead, I decided to switch over to engineering and focus on civil engineering, and eventually switch my emphasis to structural, which is what I do now. After graduation, I moved up to Michigan in 2015 and worked there for 4 years doing structural engineering in the Saginaw area. Up there, it's a lot of industrial work. There's a lot of auto industry jobs there, so we did a lot of work with GM. And other industrial applications of engineering. And then in 2019, I moved back to Kansas City and spent a few years working here, doing retail work, some multifamily residential work. And now I work for Hollis+Miller Architects, which are in the Crossroads. We specialize in school additions and renovations. So a lot of the school districts in the area, when you guys get new additions, when you renovate existing buildings, we're usually the firm that helps with that. So my job in general, to explain very briefly, is to help the building stand up. So an architect will come in, converse with the client, with the school district, and figure out how they want the addition to look, how they want the space to feel. And then the structural team will help support those designs and figure out how to make it stand up, how is it safe to be in, how to work with existing materials and the sites to create the design that people want to see.
Great introduction, you guys. This is going to be such a lot of fun. So let's go into Q&A. And while we're waiting for something to come in from the crowd, that's another hint. There's your third hint, by the way, in 7 minutes that I want you to ask questions if you're back in the attendee section. Let's just start with this. I think both of you guys kind of mentioned this a little bit, but if we could dive a little bit deeper into just talking about how what you do affects the community around you. Right? Like, seems to be something you guys both mentioned that seems to be of importance. Like, what do you like? Is there enjoyment, or what kind of enjoyment you get from shaping the community? And maybe I should direct Martha. How about you go first on this one, and Lily, you'll get to go first on the next one.
Well, Brett, one of the things that I really like about the work that we do here at the KC STEM Alliance is the variety of people and initiatives and projects that we get to work on. And so for those of you listening, I really thrive on having multiple projects and multiple things in the air. If I get tired of doing one thing, I can shift attention, and I feel a little bit like that juggler in the middle of the circus, just making sure I don't drop the plates. But I like that. I thrive on that. And what's exciting right now in Kansas City is all of the things that are happening. So, for those of you that aren't aware, Kansas City is the home to the largest per capita number of engineers, architects, and construction workers. And that whole field is called global design. And we're actually the capital of sports architecture with some of the architecture firms that we have here. As Lily mentioned, the work around schools and school redesign, that is, a lot of that work happens here in Kansas City, and people don't know that. There's new work that's happening that's being promoted called biologics, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think, what I get excited about is just the variety of opportunities that are happening in STEM here in Kansas City, and then making sure that we're communicating that out to all of our youth and all of our families so that they know how they can engage.
Yes, absolutely. Man, Kansas City is just a happening place, isn't it? It is a hidden gem in the Midwest. So Lily, anything you want to add to that, just about shaping the community or the way that your job or your industry even does that?
Yeah, so I think in particular with school designs, it's very rewarding to see our projects be constructed in general. And I think the nice thing about structural engineering in particular is that you get the chance to see the project that you designed in person in front of you. It's really amazing to see a building that you worked on, being built, and see the work that you put into it right in front of you. I think there's a lot of very cool engineering professions, but this in particular is one where you can literally see the results of what you did. And a lot of times with the rate that we're constructing things, you can see that results within a year. I mean, it's a pretty quick turnaround. And it's a very rewarding feeling to see that in front of you. But I think with school designs, the thing that I really like about it is nobody wants to go to school in a brick building that was built in the 1930s, has no windows, the hallways are really tiny. I know when I went to elementary school, my school was like that. It felt, very much like a dungeon, and it's not the fault of the school itself, but that's just how buildings were. And I think the ability to transform a learning space into something that people actually want to be in is a very cool thing. If you can make a space feel, warm and welcome and open to students, they're going to want to be there and spend time there and, invest more of themselves into the school and into their learning. So I really like the opportunity to be a part of a team that allows those spaces to be built for people that need them. And in particular, I think as we go towards, future designs, we're really looking at emphasizing how to make this more environmentally friendly, how do we make it more accessible for people who have disabilities and additional needs that maybe weren't designed for in the past. How do we incorporate different visions so that all types of students can utilize the space really well instead of just, one particular type. So that to me is something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, you think about, so the middle schoolers that are on this right now, and it sounds like we have a group of them that are watching, to think about if they look around the room that they're in right now, that somebody designed that to be accessible for people, to be well lit, to be safe for them to sit in. So like the fact that you're designing things that keep thousands and thousands of students safe, I mean, that's pretty cool. We take a lot of that for granted, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. Amy, it looks like we have some questions coming in. If you want to start asking those, and we'll let our participants or our panelists, take a shot at answering them.
Sure. And Lily, as promised, we'll let you go first this time. So we do have a question in regards to what experiences do you recommend for middle school students to participate in kind of at that early age?
So I think for engineering in particular, doing activities that kind of stimulate, your logic, your creative reasoning, your spatial reasoning, just curiosity into different fields, how things are built, how things work. I think activities that really kind of delve into that, and not necessarily on, the curriculum basis, but I think there are plenty of sort of fun ways to start getting into that side of things to really spark the interest in those fields, is what I would recommend for that age. And I think Martha can probably speak more on it. There's certainly a lot of programs in the Kansas City area that help engage students. There's one, Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day, that just happened last week that I took place in. It's really fun. It's a way to get the girls engaged and to kind of promote women in engineering in particular. And then as you get up to the high school age, there's also more programs for that age group that can kind of keep promoting that. Would you agree, Martha?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the Society of Women Engineers, the Kansas City chapter, who hosts that Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day every year, they recognized that middle school was really an important time. So they created Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day Junior for middle school girls. So if any of the teachers are listening, take a look and just Google IGED, IGED Junior, and see when that is happening and register your kids. I think the other thing that when we think about middle school students, is that, you know, your opportunities happen not only during the school day. So really take a look at the classes that are offered at your school, and try them. You know, don't be afraid to try them, and take some friends and, you know, go try those classes together and see what you like. So middle school is a great age to dabble in different coursework. In the out of school space, there are lots of clubs, lots of opportunities. We work with one in particular called First Robotics. And so great way to tinker and to solve problems and to innovate. And then there's been some really interesting research done around just the ability to develop, you know, when you're thinking about engineering. And I'd be interested in Lily's feedback on this. You know, part of engineering is having developed your visual spatial skills. So Lily, I'm thinking about the work you do and thinking about, okay, where do we need to place things and where do columns need to be? And so one of the ways that you can, when you're younger, develop your visual spatial skills is through sketching. And so, you know, if you're bored in your classroom, not that you're ever going to be bored, but if you have some time, sketch the room you're sitting in. Where is the door in relationship to the windows? Where are the desks in relationship to the door? If you're outside and you're looking at a playground, you know, what's the spatial distancing of swings from the slide? So sketching is a really important skill set to help develop your visual spatial skills, which is something that you need for engineering. Lily, what about visual spatial skills?
So yeah, in particular in structural engineering, but also mechanical would be another really good example of using that. We use a lot of 3D modeling programs still. So we use one that's called Revit, which integrates a bunch of different models for a building structure. So you can have an architectural model, a mechanical model, a structural model. And basically you design all the elements in 3D, you build them in this computer model, and then you can sync all the models together. So as you're looking through the building, you get a 3D view of how everything fits together. You can see if, oh, that wall is running into my column, don't want that to happen. Or there's a window floating in the middle of the room, that shouldn't be there. So that's a great example of how we kind of integrate that in our day-to-day practice. But there are also plenty of other 3D modeling programs that are used for mechanical, like SolidWorks would be one that people use, 3D AutoCAD. And they're all just ways to better understand what you were trying to design. If you're designing gears or an industrial system, all of these things require you to understand how they fit together in real space and understand how different parts work together. So yeah, sketching is a great one. We did a lot of sketching when I was in school. I still do sketching daily, just to get sections on a page if we're trying to explain this is how this column and beam go together. We want to show how that works. And so that's something that I draw up. And usually in the process of that, you might figure out here is a problem with it, or here's something I didn't notice. So yeah, sketching is a great thing to practice. Just playing with like Legos and blocks. I love Legos and blocks. They're so fun. I love getting them as gifts. That's great. Even if you don't get like a pre-made set, you can just get, you know, your standard building blocks are perfect for trying to do that. Yeah, just, you know, trying to figure out if you've got, let's say, a shape and you want to build it in Legos, how does that go together? If I want it to look this way from a certain direction and this way from another direction, how do I build it so that these two different views actually work together? So yeah, that's a great way to get into it.
Brett, you have kids. What's the video game where you are creating cities kind of in 3D? I know it's really popular with young people.
Is Minecraft?
Minecraft, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is I don't get paid by Minecraft, but spending time doing Minecraft really does translate, especially if you're interested in STEM fields.
You know, you guys have mentioned two things. Like I think of like whenever I was little and I was building stuff out of Legos, and you make a house and you're building that first wall and it's not strong, and then you start to figure out different ways to arrange the Legos. Like you start overlapping the bricks so that they do this instead of going one crease straight up and down, and you're like, oh, look at that, it's stronger now. And you know, there's so many things that you can learn just by playing as a kid, you know. Or you know, if you have a chair in your room that's wobbly and you sit down with your parent and try to figure out like what's wrong with it and what you can do to fix it. Like there's so many little things. You're always learning STEM skills. It's just, I don't think that we often understand, if you're a middle school student, you probably don't realize how much science and mathematics you were learning all the time, and engineering. I mean, it's just everywhere, right?
Well,
Uh,
paper airplanes, fiddling around with designs on paper airplanes, or I even, when I think about sports, kicking a soccer ball and looking at, your angles and your spin. I was a tennis player, so, thinking about pace on the ball and angles. I mean, great geometry. I could win with a really good acute angle. So I think it's just thinking about, the STEMs and everything, and how do we just have fun using those skills, and then how does that translate into what you might study in high school or beyond?
Yeah. I also love that both of you mentioned the sketching piece, because Martha, do you remember that Purdue test about visualization?
Yep.
In 45 seconds or less, can you kind of tell like the abstract of what they figured out about sketching and visualization and what was important there?
Yeah. So what they learned from it's the Purdue visual spatial test. There's 4 of them. They're really fun to do. You can just Google and find them. But what they learned is that girls early on, if you haven't done a lot of work in the space, may not have that skill set fully developed. And so it's actually research done out of the Ohio State University. And what they recognized is that we're all trainable. So even if we don't start out with great visual spatial skills, we're trainable. And one of the ways to work on that is sketching.
Yeah. And the success rate of females in that program and this is back in the 70s, but the success rate of females in their program just skyrocketed when they simply focused on sketching for their incoming freshmen, which is bonkers. You would think that everybody thinks engineering is just math and like sitting with your calculator in a little cubicle, and that's not at all what it is. There's so much more to it. I think that's just really cool. We really went down the rabbit hole. So thank you for elaborating for us on that topic. Okay, so Amy, we got another question here. I'll let you go to the next question, and then keep those questions coming, crowd. We like this.
So this one is shifting to a little bit older than middle school. So this particular person has a question for a high school sophomore looking for engineering opportunities. So what might you recommend that he should do? I think we heard some opportunities for females, but what are the opportunities for our males to get some exposure to the different types of engineering in the KC area? So, if there's shadowing opportunities or events or organizations, any guidance that you have. Martha, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. So we're really fortunate in Kansas City because of the Kauffman Foundation, who seed funded both in-school and out-of-school STEM experiences. And the in-school one is called Project Lead the Way, and there is specific coursework in high school called PLTW, and it's engineering, and there's a whole series of courses that you can take all 4 years, and some years you can take multiple courses, and that program is actually all the way down to preschool. But for your son, who's a high school sophomore, he needs to look and see if his school offers Project Lead the Way. Most likely they do. I'd also encourage him to take physics because that is hugely important. And then in the out of school space, First Robotics is the other program that we work with, but I would also point you to a website. If you go to the KC STEM Alliance website at kcstem.org, you'll find a tab for STEM Connect KC. And that has a list of over 90 partners here in Kansas City that offer opportunities around STEM, and many of them are engineering. And then there's also an event calendar. And so I would go there. That we have a lot of engineering firms that offer experiences. Not all of them offer job shadows, but some of them offer, come and spend an evening and learn about what we do. Kiewit actually has a paid internship program for high school students. So a student who is a sophomore right now would be eligible for that program, and the application should come out pretty soon. We'll start to see internships maybe scale up as more districts add real world learning, but those are some things that I would encourage your son to think about now. And then all the other things that they can consider doing around working in teams and working on communication skills, those types of things are really important.
Lily, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
I think those are all very good suggestions. My only other one would be, before getting to college, if you have an idea of what kind of topics your son is interested in, if it's more in the science space, if it's more coding, more math, that can kind of give you an idea of what types of engineering might be interesting. When I was looking to choose my major, I knew I liked doing math a lot, and I knew I liked physics, and I knew I did not like biology and chemistry and those sorts of sciences. So what I ended up doing is I was at the University of Missouri. I was familiar with engineering as a career because my dad did it. So I just went to the College of Engineering website, looked at the majors they offered, went one by one and figured out that one's not interesting, that one is, that one's not, that one is. And kind of sort of went through the options that way before I figured out what I wanted to do. And so something like that can be helpful to your son if he doesn't quite know how he wants to specialize. And it's a good way to just get familiar with different types of engineering. A lot of schools will put kind of a brief description on there too, that he can kind of look through. But I would suggest doing that, kind of narrow it down to sort of a field per se, or some options. And then if you know any engineers at all or any scientists, they'll have enough background to maybe help direct your son a little bit more as well. He can talk to them specifically about his interests and what he does and doesn't like, and they might be able to offer more specific job opportunities and interests that he might not know about.
Awesome, thanks. And Brett, would you like to mention anything about engineering?
I have to make a shameless plug here. So that's why, if you're a Northland student, if you're going to go to a high school in Clay or Platte County, then there's a good chance that you work with us here at Northland Caps. And that's what we actually do, is we're actually lining up 340 internships for kids for next spring semester. They're doing the school day for high school credit. And so it's a half-day program, and it's eligible for juniors and seniors. So especially somebody that's a sophomore, you're in our prime kind of recruiting area. So we'd love to reach out. Northlandcaps.org is our website. I'll put that in the chat. But I would also tell you, even if you look at that and you decide Northland Caps isn't an option, that many of our high schools are trying to get into this as well. And so I would suggest, no matter which high school you go to, even if you're like in Iowa and you happen to catch us on YouTube later on somehow, you need to go talk to your high school counselor. There's no better way to figure out what opportunities are available in your area than going and talking to your counselor and saying, how can I do this? Because if it's through your school, your counselors are the ones that are going to know.
Awesome, thank
And
you.
I also think, as you said Iowa, I was like, oh, people from outside of here will watch this. All of your post-secondary, your community colleges and your universities have great programs in the summer and throughout the year, especially during breaks. So I'd check out all your local post-secondary institutions, because they have faculty that are offering hands-on experiences too.
Very cool. We did have another question that came in. So this might be geared a little more towards Martha, so we'll start there. What do you suggest for a career path in earth science?
Well, lots of fun careers. Lily will probably weigh in on this too, because as I think about all of our engineering firms that are tied to construction, you have a whole battery of folks that understand soil and water and, building infrastructure. So I'd love Lily to weigh in on that. And then I have some other suggestions as well. So how do you work with folks that have to address what the substances that you're building on?
Sure. So under the civil engineering umbrella, there are a few types of engineers that deal specifically with soils. Geotechnical engineering is the big one. So geotechnical engineers work with the materials at a building site. So if you think about the types of soils you could build on, it might be clay, it could be like a swamp. You really have a whole variety of soils. And obviously that's going to impact the kinds of loads you can put on them, the kinds of structures that you can build. And so geotechnical engineers really specialize in how do we work with the soil that's here so that we can build something on it, so that we can make this a usable material. They would also deal with major earthworks projects. If there are highways and you're cutting a path through, large hill, they work to retain the soil back. They figure out the soil's properties, how to work with it, all that good stuff. So it's glorified playing with dirt. It's really fun. You get to take a lot of good classes in that. There are also hydraulics engineers and environmental engineers. Those both deal with watershed. How does it work with the landscape as a whole? Environmental engineering can also look at, it's a little less with soil, but it would have more to do with, you do like crop management even, but also pollution, just working with that sort of stuff too. So there's a lot of different opportunities in the civil field that kind of encompass soil studies.
Well, even I know some firms that have archaeologists who need to go into spaces and determine what might be already there from a preservation standpoint. So archaeology would be an interesting kind of connection to earth science. You mentioned GIS, Lily, and GIS mapping. So mapping of what is on top of the earth, but there's also, I have a niece who does ocean mapping. And mapping the ocean floor. And she's been on a research vessel owned by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and has mapped the ocean floor over by Hawaii. And she's getting a degree in marine science. You also think about even beyond just our own atmosphere. If you're interested in earth science, are you also interested in maybe the work that NASA or the Jet Propulsion Lab is doing? So there are a lot of opportunities here in Kansas City. Believe it or not, we have some great post-secondary institutions that are doing work in that space. Up at UMKC, we have a faculty member who is the expert on parachutes, who lands parcels in restricted parts of the country. So as you think about how that might connect to earth science and how we need to maybe drop products in different locations. So hopefully that gives you a few ideas of what to do with earth science.
Yeah, I was thinking there's also, of course, there's geology would be a pretty good one. Meteorology is great. You can work with the Air Force with that. You can work with obviously just a meteorology news station, plenty of local opportunities for that. And then specifically for structural engineering, there are engineers who look at seismic activity because earthquakes are obviously something that can really disrupt a building and people in it. And you want to make sure that you understand how the earthquake happens, how it works, what part of the countries have more seismic activity than others. You can work with teams that do hands-on research and modeling earthquakes and how that affects certain building materials. So those are some other opportunities too in earth science.
And this is great. You guys, this is like a master class. This should be like required for anybody that's going through like a freshman orientation class with their counselor or something in high school. Fantastic stuff. Okay, can you talk, Martha, just really briefly about ecosystem and why that's a big deal? Like, why should kids care? What is it? And then why should kids care about the fact that this thing is going on here in Kansas City?
Sure. From a kid perspective, it just means you have so many things available to you. There's so many companies and nonprofit orgs and associations and your schools that are really interested in providing any opportunity that you can think about. And so as an ecosystem, what that does is it pulls together all the partners. So the libraries are engaged, and science, we're fortunate we have Science City right in our backyard, and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and how are they tapping into the STEM space? And then every single one of our districts is really engaged in STEM work. And so there's just so many opportunities, and the role of the KC STEM Alliance is to try to pull together all of those partners so that we all know what each other is doing, and then to have a repository, which is what STEM Connect KC is. And so we are really pleased to lead that work because we want every student in the metro to find their place, regardless of whether they go to public school, private school, home school, charter school. And that's the value of the ecosystem, so that we can build off of each other's resources and provide opportunities for all students.
Yeah, that's very cool. You guys both mentioned that you actually left Kansas City for a while, but then you came back. Was there a reason for that? I mean, or maybe I should ask a different question, which is like, how does what you see in Kansas City compare to other communities that you've been involved in?
Well, I'm a Navy brat, as I mentioned early, and what I learned early on from my family is that home is where your feet are. And what I like about Kansas City, and we lived 9 years just outside of Boston, and at the end of the day, the day is the same. You get up, you get showered, you eat your breakfast, you get dressed, you head out the door, and so yes, things are a little bit closer and on a little bit bigger scale out in Boston. We lived 5 years in Wisconsin. It gets a heck of a lot colder up there, so we learned how to have appropriate clothing and how to drive in snow. But what I'm excited about Kansas City, and I don't know if you saw this weekend in the news, but there's this concept of a gondola that's going to connect KCK and from bluff to bluff, and how exciting is that going to be? And the redesign of the levee and redevelopment along our river, and when we left, there were still, and went to New England, there were still pigeons flying inside Union Station. And so to come back and see that redesigned, there were tumbleweeds rolling down the middle of the downtown. It's just, now you come back and downtown is prospering. And if I'm a kid and I can be involved in, really celebrating what Kansas City has, and you can't discount, I love the value that the Chiefs and Sporting KC and the Royals are bringing, because how fun has that been? But I just think this is a great place. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of us come back because we love living here and we love the people. For many of us, our families here, and ultimately that's sometimes what draws us back.
Lily, how about, that's awesome. I agree with you on so many things there. Lily, how about you? What have you noticed about Kansas City, or why'd you come back?
Yeah, so I came back because my family's here, my husband's family is here, and we miss being around them primarily. But I just really like living in Kansas City as a whole. I like seeing the revitalization of downtown. I live in North Kansas City, and they're putting in a ton of stuff there. It's becoming a really fun place to live. I loved growing up here. My school was great. I had a lot of wonderful opportunities, and it's been really nice as an adult to get to kind of visit some places in, the downtown that I didn't know about, and really sort of engage the community in a different way. I think Kansas City offers a lot of opportunities, a lot of fun stuff if you know where to look. I've really enjoyed being back for the couple of years that I have. Of course, I did move back just before COVID hit, so bad timing on that one, but it's still been great.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting close to the end. So as we wrap things up here, are there any closing thoughts that you feel like you'd like to dispense, some knowledge you'd like to drop on the students that might be listening to this, or maybe some adults, who knows who's listening to this?
So not a shameless plug, a really intentional plug, to use the DeBruce Foundation's Agile Work Profiler. You can do it on your phone, takes 7 minutes. And what I like about the Agile Work Profiler is it not only shows you what you're good at, but also what you like, and then that intersection. And so I'd encourage you to find out what your agilities are. Mine are innovating and caring for others. And so I would encourage you to check out the agilities and the Agile Work Profiler.
I think my advice would be, don't be afraid of your interests. I think with engineering in particular, if you don't know an engineer or haven't been exposed to it, it's hard to picture what it would be like as a career, if it would be a right fit for you. It's something that can come across as very daunting, I think, especially when you look at the coursework. It is challenging coursework, but I think if you have an interest in science and math, or you enjoy creative problem solving and logic and you like doing things like that, really take some time and think about what you want to do, because there are so many opportunities and things you can do in a STEM field. If you're into it, it's super fun. I love my job. I love doing what I do. And there, I think, are so many types of engineers that would agree, and so many scientists and people in tech and math that would also say, just play around with it, see what you like. And there are so many great resources that everyone here has mentioned today about how you can figure that out and get more into it. And I would just encourage it, because it's a lot of fun. You know, doing what you like is a great thing.
That's such great advice. Introverts and extroverts can both be successful. People that like the design versus the building versus the fixing can all be successful. You know, like it doesn't matter who you are. And what you guys are doing is so valuable because it affects people. And that's such a big part of this lesson, right? Engineers, your job is not just to make a building. You don't make the building unless it's for a purpose and it's helping your community and it's helping the people that are in the community, you know? So I love that. I love that idea as a closing kind of thought. That was perfect. So, hey, we do need to wrap up. I believe that's all the time we have for today. So I would definitely like to thank Martha and Lily for taking the time to share their passion and their insight with us. And I hope that if you're in the crowd here, or you're watching this later on, I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about one of thousands and thousands of amazing career opportunities that exist right here in Kansas City. I mean, there is so much opportunity, and we don't want you to leave this session or this video without understanding what actually is going on in our community. When this ends, please take a minute or two to help complete the survey. It's going to pop up on your screen after the session ends. And all that does is it helps ensure us that we are bringing you helpful and relevant content. If you want to find out more on educational programs or career opportunities related to our industry discussed today, please be sure to visit www.nebaworkskc.org. That's NEBA works, WORKS, KC.org. And be sure to look at our YouTube channel and our social media, and you'll be able to find more events like this career speaker series in the near future on our website. So thank you again to Martha and Lily, and thank you to our audience for asking fantastic questions. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for including me.